Hello everyone, my name is Łukasz Malinowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer. And today I've got a very special guest. A guest that actually takes the IoT capabilities and leverage that for good to help people to enable remote healthcare, hospital at home, and other very important topics. So, hello guys, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. I'm great that you are with me today.
Thanks for having me, Lucas.
So, could you briefly describe your background for the audience? Where are you right now, and how you got there?
So my background is that I've a corporate life in infrastructure software companies like Oracle, like Novell, like VMware. So the last 15 years, I've seen how the cloud has transformed the way hardware or the value of hardware gets consumed in the infrastructure space. And so in a few years ago, I decided really to go into entrepreneurship, and I co-founded Medisanté. Medisanté is an innovator, Swiss-based. We are incubated in Paris Santé Campus, and we're an innovator in medical IoT, and we apply global IoT technologies and global cloud technologies to change the way basically doctors can benefit from IoT.
Yeah, exactly. So, we started with the hospital at home concept. Could you explain like the idea behind it? How can we implement such approach using technology?
Yeah, so there are several dimensions of hospital at home. I would say the first use case is to prevent elderly people from going to the hospital or into senior residences in the end of life that unfortunately we will all be facing. So usually these people are above 70, typically between 70 and 90. Not necessarily the most digital affine type of citizens in every country. And it's all about, as I said, preventing the hospitalization through proactive monitoring by care teams in modern remote patient monitoring platforms. So these are the costs of those chronic patients in every healthcare system across the world are usually substantial, very high costs. So every percentage you can avoid to spend on something that is big in terms of healthcare budget is definitely worth it. So typically, the conditions we talk about are um, how can you get hypertension under control? How can you get diabetes under control? How can you get let's say the weight management under control, things like that. And I would say the second use case is more ad hoc, less long term over multiple years. It's more about ensuring a continuum when the patients get out of the hospital or discharged. And often these people can be of any age, right? Because we can all be patients in hospital at some stage. So typically, we might be 1 or 2 or 5 days or 10 days in a hospital, and then we get discharged, and we can benefit from telemonitoring. So imagine you get a hip replacement, and the doctor believes there is a risk of infection, or you were a COVID patient, and you kind of improved your condition, but you wanted to be the care team offered to monitor you over 1 week with a pulse oximeter or spirometer. So these are, I would say, the two use cases. There is the long-term care to prevent hospital admission, And the other one, which is more the extension of the hospital at discharge, with usually sometimes more acute conditions in this second case, and also a population that might not be the elderly population. It can be anybody of us. And this is important because for the elderly patients, it's the simplicity of the technology you provide is extremely important. While maybe for younger generations who get discharged, they are more digital affine than the elderly patients.
Yeah, I think that is actually a great topic that we could cover before we proceed. As you said, most of your users are elderly people that are not necessarily technical savvy, right? So I believe that one of challenges is to make your solution as user friendly and as easy to use as possible, right? Because that essentially needs to extend the healthcare from the hospital once they move back to their home, right? So could you elaborate a bit more on how to make that sophisticated IoT solution user-friendly, especially when we talk about users that are not technical savvy?
Yes, so you're totally right. Ease of use, usability, both for all stakeholders, is a key aspect for the successful deployment of IoT technologies in virtual care. So the stakeholders are multiple. It starts with the care teams. If the care teams struggle with the technology, they won't use it. Then, of course, the patient. But what is very important as well are the technical teams that shield the doctors and support the patients. They shield the doctors from the device complexity, and they support the patients in using the technology. So if I describe what we achieve, and then I explain you how we achieve it. Remote patient monitoring starts with the doctor. There is no remote patient monitoring if there is no doctor involved, if there is no doctor who is paid by the state, the healthcare system, the hospital, etc. So the way it works with Medisanté is that in a third-party modern remote patient monitoring, the care team assigns device 33 to a patient, and they say, Mr. Jones, go home and measure. So this process of onboarding a patient with the device cannot take more than 30 seconds. Otherwise, there is not a single doctor or nurse that will do it. Then, so there is a seamless onboarding in what we offer. So swipe of a barcode, device 33, map to a patient ID, go home. And then on
let me jump in here, because you mentioned device, so you are not leveraging like the smartphone of the patient. Like you've got a dedicated device that is fully managed by you, and the whole onboarding process is as simple as reading the barcode. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So indeed the whole philosophy of Medisanté is to bring the connectivity, the cellular connectivity to the home in a medical kit, instead of relying on the consumer smartphone. So once this basic is given, the magic I just described in terms of device experience is possible for all stakeholders. So I described the one for the doctors in a third-party compliant health IT system, where the data is always hosted in a given country. Then for the patient, the device experience, because there is no reliance on a consumer smartphone, it means that the patient has nothing to configure. He doesn't have to download something. He might not even have a smartphone. He might not even have broadband access. Again, the connectivity is brought to him in the medical kit, either with an IoT SIM card in a medical device, such as a blood pressure monitor, a weight scale, a blood glucose monitor, etc., or in a cellular IoT gateway, with auto pairing Bluetooth devices. So it's always of paramount importance that there is no configuration whatsoever for the patient. So this is really the core of the device experience that cellular IoT enables between doctor, for both for the patient and for the doctor, even if it starts with the doctor. And then the device experience also for the technical teams is very important. And that's where the Medisanté Hub or M+ Hub, which is our cloud IoT cloud infrastructure platform in virtual care, kicks in. So the two tenets of Medisanté Hub is that we enable a 3-click interoperability with any modern health IT system that is able and willing to collect IoT data from the outside world. So we enable this really in 3 clicks. And the second thing we enable with this cloud infrastructure platform, it is that the biomedical engineers can monitor their fleet across multiple devices and gateways from multiple manufacturers. And all those devices have 2 characteristics. The first one is they're always provisioned by the healthcare providers. And second, they require no configuration by the patients. So if I take these criteria and I explain what it means technically, it means that the devices are pre-validated. They connect to our cloud infrastructure platform. We say they are powered by Medisanté. So we have, for instance, a partnership with Boehrer, the home medtech leader in Europe. So they have, for instance, a weight scale, a telemedicine weight scale powered by Medisanté, or a telemedicine blood pressure monitor powered by Medisanté. This means that a manufacturer like Boehrer relies on Medisanté Hub as a kind of cloud bridge between the hardware at home and the telemedicine, the remote patient monitoring platform anywhere in the world. And really the value we add to a manufacturer like Boehrer is that we help them integrate in 3 clicks into third-party health IT systems, and we enable those providers then to do the fleet management and again, to keep the device experience for the doctors and the patients totally seamless and secure. Security and privacy are also very big topics.
Yeah, for sure, and we will get there. But let me dive a bit deeper in what you covered, because those were extremely important points. So you mentioned that 3 clicks integration, and I'm a huge believer that actually what stops the huge popularity of IoT products is the complexity and lack of support for the ecosystem. And what you just described is basically that your solution is designed from the ecosystem perspective in mind, right? So you've got those devices that can connect directly to your cloud backend. You've got those edge gateways that can also interact with local devices. And even from the technical team perspective, that the integration is very smooth. So I believe
Yes.
that this is a huge potential for scaling this solution compared to a bit more complex designs that are expecting the end user to be technical savvy and security aware. And like I talk about it a lot, that the end users are not responsible for keeping their devices secure. The vendor is the party that manage those devices and should enable the security by design. And you mentioned security and privacy in the medical space. That's a huge of huge importance. Could you elaborate a bit more about on how you manage the privacy, security, and compliance of your devices at the end of the day?
Indeed. So first of all, in terms of security, we make no compromise on security. So this starts by putting an IoT module in the device or in the gateway, encrypting the communication from the device, the module, to our cloud, then encrypting it in the AWS cloud, and then letting the health IT engineers from what we call a target clinical system define the authentication methods by which they accept to receive data. So we have like 15 technical acronyms like API key, like OAuth 2.0, JSON Web Token bearers that are familiar for the people in charge of security. So the whole, although the data is it's non-personal identifiable information that is in transit between the device, our cloud infrastructure platform on AWS, and the target clinical system. Even though this data is not identifiable, it's very important that we take care of it, and encryption is a key element. So this is one part of the answer on the security side. Now, if I take your question about the privacy, here as well, unlike any solution that relies on a consumer smartphone, where the patient, after he logs in a mobile app, basically he shares all his health data with the manufacturer in the proprietary cloud of that manufacturer. With Medisanté, the device assignment to a patient always happens in a third-party compliant health IT system. So let's say from a technical perspective for the audience here, the mapping between a patient ID and the device ID happens in a third-party HIPAA compliant system in the US, or a third-party compliant system where the patient data are hosted in Germany, in France, in Belgium, in the UK, etc. And then the whole information, the whole IoT data that we transmit from device to that platform is void of patient identifiable information. So of course, it's the highest protection you can give to a health IT system, because if you don't have personal identifiable information, it's easy to protect the privacy, because you have no information that would jeopardize the privacy. It's pure information like device 33, 120, 80 blood pressure, target system, New York. Great. 4-volt battery and signal strength 4 out of 5. Out of this information, you cannot derive any patient identity. And as a result, by applying global technology like cellular IoT with roaming agreements and global cloud technologies for non-identifiable data, we have a kind of best of world. So we have both the compliance and security of the healthcare systems, and on the other side, we have the scale of the global technologies, but applied to non-identifiable data.
Yeah, I love that approach, and like to be honest, this is the approach that I often suggest to my customers. That if you can strip out the PII data, so the personal information, data, then you are better off, right? If you do not need to use that data at all, and if you can, for instance, strip the data on the edge, on the user's device, or on the edge gateway, as you said, then your life is way easier, and you do not compromise any gains for the end users, but you respect the privacy and, as you said, the connection between the end user and the data, like the telemetry data that you gather from those devices, is only available in the system that is actually used by doctors, right? So because they need to know and they need to be able to connect the data with the customer or with the patient in this case. So on that note, could you briefly describe the difference between the telemonitoring and self-monitoring, right? So because especially when we are speaking about elderly people, sometimes they need some extra assistance just to, let's say, measure their blood pressure, for instance. So what's the difference between the telemonitoring, self-monitoring, and how that actually helps patients to monitor state of their health?
Yeah, so with all the mobile apps and the consumer devices that are connected via Bluetooth over a smartphone since, let's say, the iPhone was introduced by Apple in the market, this is all about self-monitoring. So typically, the patient is a user, he's a consumer or she's a consumer. They buy their device, for instance, in, let's say, a supermarket or in a pharmacy. And then they configure the device over the smartphone. There is no doctor involved anywhere in the process, or only by exception, let's say. And the patient does self-monitoring. And of course, disability depends on his digital savviness. So there's a kind of entry barrier, but most people can deal with that. In terms of telemonitoring or remote patient monitoring, it's a different game, because medtech industries and healthcare industry is both industries are very fragmented. So there are hundreds of health IT systems, and there are hundreds of device manufacturers. So to have the two world, the hardware world of the medtech world at home and the health IT world distributed in all the countries across the world, this is an interoperability nightmare. So that's why we really focus first on solving this integration into health IT systems, this interoperability in 3-click I mentioned previously. And so interoperability, the technical interoperability, is the prerequisite to enable the device experience between the care team and the patients in a telemonitoring setup. So there can be no telemonitoring, no remote patient monitoring, if there is no reimbursement or public funding of the doctor to do that type of job. And right now, Europe is catching up pretty fast, but country by country, because there is no such thing as a European healthcare budget, right? Every healthcare budget is a budget owned by the parliament in every country in Europe. So there are 49 shapes of gray, right, in the way you proceed, the speed, how fast do you introduce reimbursement policies. So in the USA, CMS introduced CPT codes, so reimbursement codes for elderly people for remote patient monitoring. So it was for the people who are no longer employees, who usually are above 65. They are pensioners. And so the first market who was solvent for the remote patient monitoring was really the United States of America before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, what happened is that the doctors everywhere in the world realized that the waiting room was empty. And then they looked in the stairs outside of the waiting room. They also realized it was empty. And then they looked in the street at the bottom of the stairs, and there was nobody, there was neither anybody. So it created a kind of shock on the care team side that telemedicine would be inevitable in their own life. While before they thought it was a nice option, and they would be the only trade in which, let's say, doing something remotely would be an option, right? Would never happen, was not possible with the 50 or 60 or 90 good excuses. But so the pandemic created this shift of perception on the doctor side that it would be part of the future. But remote patient monitoring, which requires device deployment in homes, was not really implemented efficiently during the pandemic. But after the pandemic, most countries started to put in place a pandemic preparedness plan for the next pandemic, basically, which is inevitable. And so multiple countries, after many years of experimentation in Europe, have introduced reimbursement of remote patient monitoring for one or multiple pathologies. So just to give you an example of what's happening right now, while in the US in 2019, CMS said, dear doctor, if you implement the whole chain between device, telecom, platform, billing, etc., you get $1,300 per year per patient. In Europe, countries like Germany now have introduced a similar package of 1,300 euro, more or less, per patient per year to telemonitor, to have a cardiologist telemonitor heart insufficient patients at a certain gravity of the illness. And France, in July 2023, has announced reimbursement for remote patient monitoring for 5 major conditions. Italy has just done a huge tender of 250 million with a cloud infrastructure backend that was also covering remote patient monitoring. Because, for instance, Italy was the first country hit in Europe by COVID-19. And so they really were keen to get prepared for the next time. And they wanted to be able to protect their elderly citizens who were the most at risk by being able to have the healthcare system collect IoT data from those people, and of course collect this data by making no compromise on inclusion, that the most fragile people could benefit from the technology, by making no compromise on security, especially currently with the geopolitics that make cybersecurity a hot topic, and also by making no compromise on privacy, of course, because that's the mission of every country, every state, every Ministry of Health, is to protect the privacy of the patients of every nation.
Mhm. So, from what you described, it looks like we are heading into a huge adoption of Internet of Medical Things, like globally, essentially. And it's great that we've got the foundations, because from the technology perspective, as you said, it looks like we are almost there, right? The thing is that now we need to wait for the legislation just to catch up and actually to put all of that potential into the actual use. Having said about the scale, who is responsible for managing that huge fleet of medical devices? Is it something that Medisanté is covering, or the device vendors got access to your platform to remotely manage those devices?
So the typical use case is every healthcare provider who at a certain point makes a strategic decision to offer telemonitoring services and secures the funding for it, of course. Once a healthcare provider has taken that decision and has secured the funds, the provider needs to look at a technology provider, usually a software provider, who can support him. So it's a health IT system provider who has a module or a solution that is 100% of their offering. If it's a newcomer that is specialized on remote patient monitoring. But basically, every doctor, every healthcare provider has 100% dependency on software. So once you have said that, it means that our clients are the health IT system providers. And the doctors are not technologists, and the technologists are not doctors. So we enable health IT system providers who understand the needs of the doctors and how they need to take care of their patients. And then they provide the software to them, but usually a device integration, device management, it's not their core competency. And so the partnership we have with these health IT system providers is that we enable them to make this device integration and this fleet management something extremely easy and also extremely scalable and extremely secure. And so to answer your question, who does the remote device monitoring or the fleet monitoring? It's usually a person or multiple a team who has a purpose to be a kind of biomedical engineer. So when there is a care process within the hospital, there is always a role sharing between a care team, a doctor, and a biomedical team. So there is always a role sharing between somebody takes care of the patient and somebody who takes care of the health of the device. So basically what we do is we apply these basic principles of the role sharing of who does remote patient monitoring versus who does remote device monitoring. And there is a biomedical engineer who is either appointed by the health IT system provider because the healthcare provider tells him, can you shield me from this device complexity and manage the fleet for me, and I pay you for doing it because you are technical guys, you know how to do that, you can hire the right person, etc. Or in some bigger organizations where they have, of course, biomedical engineers within the hospital, they decide to expand the scope of those biomedical teams to also manage IoT outside of the hospital. But the reality today is that when you talk about connected devices, 99.99% of the devices managed by biomedical engineers are inside the hospital. And we have just been selected as part of Horizon 2020 tender called SciMedSec. It is led by the Technical University of Dresden. There are about 11 companies across Europe, and the topic is enhancing cybersecurity of connected medical devices. And in this consortium, we lead a work package about IoT fleet management, cyber secure IoT fleet management to enable the hospital at home. So it's an emerging new discipline, fleet management for hospital at home. But ultimately, it's a kind of biomedical engineer, either hired by the health IT provider, the system provider, or the healthcare provider themselves, if they prefer to keep it in-house.
So basically, you create the foundation and the connectivity platform, and they bring the domain knowledge of medical devices and patient monitoring. Because actually, at the end of the day, you monitor both the health of your patients, but actually also the health of the device itself, right? Because you need to be sure that whatever that device measures and sends to the backend is accurate, right? Because otherwise that would make more harm than good things.
Yes, totally. At the end, remote patient monitoring, the health of the patients the data on the screen of the doctor. It relies on technology, 100%. And we want to make that cloud bridge and that telecom bridge between the devices in the homes and the health IT system. We want to make it really efficient. And to be efficient, to make sure this data collection is reliable at scale, you really need to have the technical teams involved, and they have no doubt about security, privacy, inclusion. And that's exactly what we do. We deliver medical IoT data as a service to the care team instead of medical IoT data as a nightmare, which is the reality of any deployment that involves Bluetooth devices, medical devices that transmit data via consumer smartphones.
Yeah, I think that like having that out of the box working experience, like this is really something that is a crucial factor for any IoT deployment that got the potential to scale and to be used by the actual end users that are not necessarily IT savvy people. So what is the best way to follow you and to stay up to date with your impact on the Internet of the Medical Things landscape?
Well, a good way to follow us is, of course, our website. It's medisanté-group.com. In terms of social media, we are pretty active on LinkedIn. So either on my personal account, Gilles Lunzenfichter, or on the company account.
Okay, so on that note, I would like to thank you so much for finding time to meet with us today, to share your insights. And yeah, I think that this is a great example of a real life IoT deployment in a tricky space, which is the IoT, the medical space, that in my personal opinion is done right. As you said about the privacy, about the security, about device onboarding, like, those are lots of moving parts that needs to be done accurately to enable the potential and to reach the market. And yeah, I'm really impressed, like, because looking from my perspective, I've got the professional view of number of platforms and products. It looks like what you did is really well thought through and really well implemented. So thank you very much for taking the time
Thank
to
you.
meet with me, for sharing that. Thank you for everyone listening. I hope that you found this interview interesting. My name is Łukasz Majnowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer, and I will speak to you next time. Bye bye.